Welcome everyone to this riveting discussion about the Falcon economy and the rise of the Gulf economy on the global stage. I'm thrilled to moderate this session of outstanding experts and business leaders, and I promise you that you would not need coffee for the next half an hour or so. We will focus on how the Gulf economies are positioning to become a global hub for trade, for logistics, for sustainability, for talents. And this is happening in an ever-changing and increasingly challenging global landscape, and in the middle of heightened geopolitical, economic, trade, and technological frictions. We will try to unveil the forces behind the transformation of the Gulf into a global hub. And our panelists, they are ready to offer their insight and discourse into this important theme. I will start with Dr. Nasir. Dr. Nasir, you've been at the heart of the Gulf economies, and I remember we spoke many years ago about the decoupling and about the fundamental changes that are taking place in the region. What do you think are the key drivers of this transformation, and how it can be sustainable?
Thank you. Let me start by saying that this is a moment of transformation for this part of the world, for the GCC in particular. That's why I think the theme of the Falcon economy is a very important one. We don't have a lot of time. The organizers gave us just 25 minutes, so I just have a few minutes. There are 4 points I want to make. Let me be very clear about them. The first one is about the multipolar world and increased fragmentation of the global economy. That is a big opportunity for the GCC countries. Why? Because they can now open the external sector, and they started to do that through trade agreements, comprehensive economic partnership agreements, which are opening up the GCC countries, in particular UAE, Saudi, to trade, investment, and portfolio flows. That will continue very rapidly. I expect that by 2024, there might very well be a GCC-China free trade agreement in place that follows President Xi's visit to Saudi Arabia last December. So you'll have a new strategic opening with China happening. The second thing that the GCC countries are doing is what I call regionalized globalization. By that, I mean that the GCC countries are increasingly integrating countries that surround them into their logistics, into their infrastructure, and opening them up, and they're investing in them. And it's not just Egypt. It's also countries in Africa, other countries in the Middle East, and also now into Central Asia, India, and the like. So regionalized globalization is, I think, going to be a big heading as we move along. Number 3, there are new economic partners that are beginning to be integrated through the global supply chain. So many countries in our region are not globalized. The GCC countries are already globalized through their supply chains. As they integrate those economies which are around us, they will become globalized through the GCC. That's theme number 1. Theme number 2 is the emergence of a new global energy map. We're sitting here in Abu Dhabi, and this part of the world, of course, has a large part of international reserves, oil and gas, etc. So that is, let's call that old fossil fuel economy. They are already at the center of that. But the new global energy map is going to be looking very different. because there are massive investments happening right now, particularly in the UAE, Saudi, and the others, into renewable energy. What that will do, it will mean that not only will they remain the center of oil and gas and fossil fuels globally, but they're going to become eventually the center for renewable energy. And in particular, I want to point to two things. A lot of people talk about the energy transition, and we're all making massive investments in solar power, wind, etc., and increased energy efficiency. And everybody has net zero emissions targets. But humanity, in my view, will fail. We are already gone in this part of the world beyond 1.5 degrees. No country, very few countries will be able to keep their commitments. So what we need to focus on is climate adaptation as opposed to climate risk mitigation. Climate adaptation means making massive investments into our infrastructure to make it climate resilient and to have infrastructure services which are climate resilient. I just want to remind you what happened in Libya, what happened in Europe during the summer, what happened in Pakistan, where 30 million people were totally displaced by extreme weather events. Those are going to continue. The amounts we're talking about for developing countries, excluding China, is over $2 trillion per year. What you're going to require is a lot of massive investments in climate tech. And I just want to leave you with this thought. This part of the world has 3 technologies it can export to the rest of the world. One of them is desalination. 50% of the world's desalination capacity is in the GCC countries. It's been tried and tested. It can be exported. The second one is district cooling. You don't need inefficient air conditioning units. You have cooling power plants that provide cooling for buildings in any district. The third one is desert agriculture. Increasingly, you're going to have to go for vertical farming, for controlled environment farming. So those 3 technologies are what this part of the world can export successfully. Third theme, digital economy. When COVID happened, this part of the world was already trying to diversify away from fossil fuels, from oil and gas. So they were into trade, tourism, opening up, transport, logistics. But those are precisely those sectors which got hit the most in COVID. No more tourism, cut down trade, and transport and logistics. So what did the countries do of this region? Going massively into the digital economy, into AI, which was being discussed a bit earlier. Now, UAE is the 4th biggest AI-driven economy in the world. I don't know how many people know, but you've got a generative language called Falcon 40B developed here. So UAE is joining China, USA, and India into digital. And digital will also transform the energy sector. So you can use AI to manage your fossil fuel assets and all your other assets. And of course, digital services will be the main driver of the digital economy. Fourth theme is the financial sector. Let's call it the Falcon financial sector. This part of the world is sitting on something like $3 trillion worth of assets, which they've been deploying elsewhere. They're now starting to deploy more and more in this part of the world, in the GCC and surrounding. I want just to make 2 statements. I mentioned energy and the need to invest more. So this part of the world, I think, should be at the forefront of creating an international climate bank. Forget all the discussions about various funds and all the rest. There's just too much politics. You need an independent climate bank. And my view is that it should be in this part of the world, in the UAE. The second, there's been enormous destruction in our part of the world. We've been living 30 years or 50 years, in my case, of nothing but war and violence. we are going to have to set up an Arab Bank for Reconstruction and Development to redevelop the countries of the region that have been destroyed by war and violence. Again, I think this should be a GCC initiative, a Falcon Economy initiative. So those are the
Thank
themes.
you, Dr. Nasser. Let's just continue with the energy transition. I mean, Dr. Nasser has set the stage for this with such innovative ideas. Monica, I mean, we're a whisker away from the COP28, and it's taking place in the UAE. Can you talk about the energy transition and we are seeing huge investment in renewables in the region by the investor in the region at home and abroad, investment in new technologies, hydrogen, carbon capture, and so on. What's your take on the energy transition in the region?
Absolutely, thank you very much. Well, I think the GCC economies, of course, are in the forefront of the hydrocarbon economy, but they're also investing significantly and wanting to become the forefront of new renewable and clean sources of energy. I also want to concur with what Dr. Nasser said, that we are already in the midst of a climate crisis. So this is something that's very urgent. And for the GCC countries, they have to move ahead of the cycle, again, because of their role in the traditional energy sources. On the positive side, we are seeing a very proactive approach, and we're starting to see the benefits of that already. As a whole, as the GCC as a whole, we actually reached peak emissions in 2013. The process actually started with a lot of the subsidy reforms that you started seeing from 2014, 2015, which meant bringing prices up more to the actual level. But we've also seen the impact of the earlier investments that have happened. In the case of the UAE, in 2017, clean and renewable sources of energy accounted for about 1% of power generation capacity. 2021, it stood at around 11%, and based on our research, we believe that the UAE clean and renewable energy will account for over 20% this year. In Abu Dhabi, with the latest solar projects coming online just this month, we believe it'll be over 30%, and that's mostly nuclear and solar. What we've also seen ahead of the COP announcements are announcements to bring forward and accelerate the energy transition. These include areas such as tripling clean and renewable energy by 2030, rather than doubling by 2050. On the carbon emissions, it's to reduce it by 40% on business by usual terms, but in absolute terms, from 2019, that's down about 19% in absolute terms. And we've also seen announcements in areas such as increasing the carbon capture. So the first area is dealing with reducing the carbon footprint of the region, and this is through cleaner power generation. That'll go into areas such as industry, and you're seeing places like Europe coming out with nuclear and wind power, and also gas for the development of blue hydrogen. And, again, UAE is looking to very much front load that. The strategy for Abu Dhabi is to provide 25% of hydrogen to some of the key energy importers in Asia. But we also have the largest green ammonium plant being built in Saudi Arabia at NEOM, and green hydrogen is also central to Abu Dhabi. We believe that this is going to provide a significant amount of financial requirements as well as investment requirements, and this is going to be also central to the wider diversification and growth story that we see over the next decade. I'm cognizant of time, so I'll end it there.
Thank you. I mean, all of this at the end will require more capital. I mean, we've seen significant capital mobilization into the region in the past, few years. Why? I mean, Atif, I think you run an investment house. Why do you think the region is attractive to investors? And are there any notable investment trends or sectors that are particularly interesting at the moment?
Yes, thank you very much for having me today, and want to thank the organizers for a great event today. I'm sitting in between two economists, so they cover the macro side of it. I'll try to shed some light in terms of the micro environment here in the GCC. I think one trend that is going very well for this area is the availability of capital. A couple of my colleagues here mentioned capital a couple of times. So, walillah alhamd, this area is blessed with a substantial amount of capital to invest. I've been in this business, in the private equity business, in terms of investing for the last 30 years. And this part of the world has been net exporter in terms of capital, where at the beginning of our firm, we were investing in the US and Europe for the last 30 years. 5 years ago, I think we saw a big shift in the investment trends. When we visit companies now in the US and Europe, most of the time it's about us investing in those companies. It's a reverse psychology now. We sit with a lot of companies and a lot of private equity providers, and they are looking to the area to invest in. One area of focus that we have here is actually two areas, business services and logistics. In the logistics, we see huge opportunities in the area of not only physical logistics, and Akhani here is a master in that field, but also in the AI and technology side of those logistics. So that's a big field. Data centers is a big field that we are looking at. And again, the business services side of that. So there is no lack of capital. I think here it's a matter of prioritization of where do you cover your resources and effort into. And we see great, inshallah, future for the Gulf. Saudi, of course, and UAE are the biggest two economies, and the best opportunities are available in those two economies.
Thank you. I think the Gulf has been embracing technology and innovation and skills development in a big way. And we know all of these are key drivers of economic growth. Fadi, I mean, you've been an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. You've been in venture capital. What do you think, I mean, where the innovation and technology are making most impact, and why, I mean, the region is becoming attractive to global talents, to creative minds, to innovators?
Thank you, Faisal. Important question. This is at the core of the transformation of the economies of the Gulf and the region and the global economies. So the digitization of the regional economies has been part of of the decision-making of the leaders of the GCC to move away from the oil-based economies. It's at the core of it. But the private sector has been the initial investor in the digital economy. There was, when the internet happened, it is the private sector that set up a few venture funds, 2 or 3 of us that came out about 10 or 15 years ago, believing that the internet economy is going to be the economy of the future. But the critical element that is today is that finally governments and its institutions have decided that this is the space that they need to invest in. They need to create the entrepreneurship ecosystem. They need to build on it, soft and hard. So the hard infrastructure is here. I don't need to talk about it, but I'll tell you what's been happening in the soft infrastructure. The most important element in enabling the digital ecosystem in the region is to get the regulators to understand that this is the future. They're the slowest people to move. I'm sorry to say that, but I need to be honest. The slowest people to move, and they need to catch up to the entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs are moving so fast that they are in the business of committing to build their business without being licensed, and then having the regulator run after them to regulate them. So every innovator in the region went out and said, do I do it, or do I wait for a regulator that's going to take a long time to understand even what I'm doing? They're catching up now. They're catching up. And this is a regional story that is at the core of it, the UAE and Saudi Arabia. They're both opening up, they're changing, and they've decided finally to make sure that the normally conservative regulators across the board, I'm not talking only about the financial regulators, I'm talking about every sector that gets regulated is opening up, and it's fueling the number of entrepreneurs that are coming up from the region. So Saudi Arabians, Emiratis, and the expatriates that are coming to the region. And so there is an amazing amount of opening up to allowing talent or wanting talent to come and not only be visitors and not only be temporary visitors, but thinking of themselves as permanent residents of this country, of this region. And these are the people who are going to be investing along with the local investors and make sure that the economies become 21st century economies par excellence. And I'm not going to elaborate more. Dr. Saidi did mention earlier about some of the things that are saying, but I'll tell you what happened is because entrepreneurs need access to capital, access to markets, access to talent, and the ability to build businesses that are getting licensed. What is fueling today the entrepreneurs that are coming to the region and popping up from the region is finally the sovereign wealth funds decided that this is a region, their own region, right? It's our own region, it's their own region, and finally they say, okay, we're going to invest in entrepreneurs that are from here or entrepreneurs that are coming here. And so you have Mubadala, ADQ, PIF in Saudi Arabia. I'll give you a final statistic on this to just mull on. When I built the practically first venture fund in the region about 12 years ago, we were 2 or 3 of us, just early on around 2014. Today, there are my last count, more than 70 venture funds in the region. 42 of them are in Saudi Arabia, and they've only been created in the past 3 years post-pandemic, because the pandemic finally got government officials to understand that the physical world is not enough. If you're not digitally enabled, you can't do commerce. And if you want to do commerce on the digital landscape, then you need to make sure that you are fueling the ecosystem with capital. Because no matter what you do in terms of hard and soft infrastructure, if you're not going to provide capital, it's not going to happen. And in today's world, our capital is the most essential capital. I don't want to wait for Silicon Valley to think that we are investable. Because we are investable and we know our markets well, and we want our regional funds and our regional family offices and our regional high net worth individual to believe that you don't only invest in Silicon Valley, you don't only invest in the West, but your home markets are a priority.
Thank you.
And I think we're out of time.
Fadi, I think I'll take the liberty to borrow a few minutes from Abu Dhabi Finance Week. Although interest rates are very high at these times, these are very good final thoughts to close the session. But I want to just have closing thoughts, just 1 minute for each panelist, about the challenges and about how to deal with them. How would we look 5 years from now? Maybe we'll start with Fadi.
So I would say, and I'll be optimistic in my last statement, is that there is a very serious dialogue amongst the people of the region that are building the economies of the region. This is very, very encouraging. During my days when I started building my business in the 80s, nobody would talk to me on any side other than other entrepreneurs. So there is a serious dialogue, and there is a seriousness about understanding the challenges that we are facing today.
Monica?
Thank you. As well, I'm very optimistic on the region. I've been looking at the Gulf economies for over 30 years, and I think the pace, the breadth, the depth of the reforms are very notable. The fact that it's also on the fiscal side, we've talked about the energy transition, we've talked about attracting capital, businesses. This is a time where we're seeing population growth, more professionals, more skilled labor coming into the region, and we're seeing investments in various areas. For the challenges, I think it's different versus different countries. You've seen, again, a lot of focus on Saudi Arabia and UAE, which is leading a lot of the reforms, but the other countries need to also pick up reforms, given the energy transition. That's going to be very important, skilling up the labor force to meet the requirements of the economy. That's very important as well. And I think for somewhere like Saudi Arabia, the breadth of the reform and the investment requirements is huge. So I think managing that in an efficient manner will be critical as well.
Atif?
Yes, and I think I would add to Hani's point on the regulatory challenges that we face here in the market. There is also the banks need to step up. A lot of the financing taking place here is your typical project finance, long-term financing. I think the banking industry here need to be retooled to understand how leverage lending, how venture capital financing is done elsewhere. We still, I think, we're way from having the proper financing tools to execute private equity, to execute venture capital. And we hope the banking industry steps up for that challenge as well.
Dr. Nasser, please.
The question was, where do we see ourselves in 5 years' time? I'm extremely optimistic as to where we're heading, because I think we've got the capital. We now have access to technology. We're now investing more in ourselves. I think a major challenge will be the human capital. Fadi, you mentioned entrepreneurs. We are going into new technologies, but we need our people also. So I think there needs to be a massive investment in technology and our people so that they are adept to harness new technologies. So when I look ahead in the next 5 years, I see us very much as a global economic center between Africa on one side, Asia on the other. Those are our main economic partners. The world has changed. There's been a radical shift in the global economic geography towards Asia. And we've got Africa next door to us at proximity. We need to think of those as opportunities for us, and we are able to do so. So when I mentioned regionalized globalization, I truly believe in that. That means going into Africa, going into India and Asia on the other, and developing our own economies. So I think when you look ahead, you've got the resources, you've got policymakers that have the vision, and are happy to implement it. And I think for young people, particularly and all of you who are here, I think we're very lucky to be at this point in time in the UAE, in the GCC, because this, again, is a moment of transformation. And you need to take that opportunity. And I think there won't be many other occasions like this one where you've got a global dislocation, but you can benefit from that.
Thank you. I think we ran out of time, and I think this panel came up with a lot of ideas that will provide, thoughts for next year events. But I think we're ending this session on a high note. And thank you very much for your time.